At our cabin budget meeting, I suggested adding winterization and basic fall service to the maintenance budget. Derek crossed it out and said, "We've never paid somebody to close the cabin." Megan nodded, then looked at me and asked, "You're still coming Saturday, right?" I stared at her for a second, slid the cabin key across the table, and said I wasn't closing it this year. The first hard freeze was 9 days away. Derek looked at the key, then at me. Why would this change anything? Megan sounded more confused than angry. We were talking about paid maintenance. I know, you've always done the close. I know that too. There were 4 owners of the cabin, all cousins of mine. I was not one of them. Megan had invited me to the budget meeting because I knew the pump, generator, propane setup, and most of the little things that had to happen before winter. The owners had every right to decide what they wanted to spend. Insurance had gone up. The dock needed work in the spring. Property taxes were not getting cheaper. Derek was trying to keep the place from turning into one of those family properties that becomes so expensive nobody wants it anymore. I understood that. What I did not understand was how winterization could be unnecessary enough to remove from the budget and still necessary enough to put on my Saturday. Derek said, "Why should we hire somebody for something the family can do?" I almost said, "Then the family can do it." What came out was, "You can decide not to budget for it. I'm just not doing the close this year." Megan picked up the key and turned it over in her hand. "Do you at least have a checklist?" "Not really." She frowned. "You do." "I have notes, model numbers, the propane company, which breaker feeds the pump, stuff like that. But Grandpa never gave me a checklist, so I never made one." Derek leaned back in his chair. "So how are we supposed to know what you do?" That question bothered me more than I expected, not because he should have known. Honestly, there was no reason he would know every step. He had spent plenty of weekends at the cabin doing other things. He had replaced deck boards with Grandpa. Megan had handled insurance calls after a hail claim. The other owners paid their share when the well pump had to be replaced. But for years, Fall had worked differently. Amy closes the cabin. That was basically the whole system. I told Megan I would send her the generator model, the propane account information, and a few notes about the water shutoff. I also told her I was not going to talk somebody through the entire shutdown over the phone. She said, "Okay," in a way that sounded like she was not sure whether she meant it. Then we went back to the budget because there were still numbers on the screen. I hadn't put a line in the spreadsheet that said, "Pay Amy." I wasn't trying to turn every year I'd helped into an invoice. I had suggested a general fall service allowance because some years all the cabin needed was the normal close, and some years it needed more. If I was available and wanted to help, fine. If I was sick, traveling, or simply did not want to spend a weekend doing it, the owners needed another option. Derek's objection was not completely ridiculous either. He did plenty of unpaid work himself. He helped put in the dock every spring and had spent most of one weekend replacing rotten stair treads. Megan handled supply runs and a lot of the paperwork nobody wanted. In his head, this was the same thing. Family members did jobs around the cabin, so paying a company for one of those jobs felt wasteful. The part he missed was that nobody had actually asked who would do mine if I did not. 10 minutes earlier, winterization had been a line Derek thought was unnecessary. Now Megan was typing, "Find cabin service," into the notes beside it. Grandpa Ray taught me how to close the place when I was in my early 20s. He had built the routine over years, mostly by learning what went wrong when he forgot something. The first time he showed me, he made me follow him from the basement utility room to the generator shed and back inside twice, because I kept forgetting which valve isolated the exterior line. He never made it sound complicated. "Cold finds water," he used to say. "So don't leave it any." That was about as close as Grandpa got to a technical manual. I liked those weekends. By late fall, most of the summer people were gone. The lake got quiet. I would wear old boots, put on a radio in the kitchen, drain the lines, shut down the pump, check the generator, connect the battery tender, make sure the propane level was reasonable, and walk the place twice before I left. When Grandpa's knees got bad, I started doing more of it myself. After he died, the cabin eventually ended up owned by 4 of my cousins. I kept doing the fall close because I knew how, because nobody else seemed eager to learn, and because I actually liked being there that time of year. At first, someone would ask, "Are you free the second weekend in October?" Then it became, "What weekend are you closing the cabin?" Then, eventually, "Amy's doing the close Saturday." I noticed the wording change, but I never treated it like a problem. Most years I would have gone anyway. That was part of why the budget meeting hit me strangely. I did not feel cheated out of years of labor. I had volunteered for a lot of it. But the budget made something obvious that our normal routine never had. There was no backup plan because I had always been the backup plan. The next morning, Megan texted me a photo of the handwritten equipment notes I had left with her. "Is this generator model current?" I told her yes and sent a photo I had taken of the service tag the previous spring. An hour later she asked which propane company serviced the property. I gave her the name. Then she asked, "Do you know anybody who does full cabin closing?" I did not. I had never needed anybody. By Thursday afternoon, she had called several places. 2 were booked for the season. 1 only did plumbing and would not inspect the generator. A local property service could fit them in Saturday because another client had rescheduled. The quote was $950 for the short-notice winterization visit and generator inspection, with parts extra if they found anything. The service was not just a plumber coming in to open a drain. They were sending someone who routinely closed seasonal properties, would check the generator, document what they shut off, and flag anything that looked like it needed attention before winter. Megan asked if there was a cheaper version where they could do part of it themselves. The company said yes, but the earliest appointment for that service was later, close enough to the freeze forecast that she did not want to risk it. Derek responded in the family text within a few minutes. $950 is ridiculous. Amy does this in an afternoon. I read that twice. Megan replied that the forecast was getting colder and they did not have many options. Derek wrote, "We have an option, she just decided not to do it." I put my phone down. That Friday, I was still thinking about going. I wish I could say I had made the decision at the meeting and never reconsidered it. I had not. I checked the weather twice. I thought about the exterior faucet on the north wall. I wondered if the battery tender was still making good contact. At one point, I pulled my old work gloves out of the hall closet and put them on top of my boots. My plan, if you can call it that, was to drive up Saturday morning, close the place one more time, and tell everyone they needed to arrange something different next year. It would have been easier. I knew where everything was. I could probably have finished before lunch. Then I looked at Derek's message again. Amy does this in an afternoon. I kept coming back to that sentence. He knew I could do it. He just thought the fact that I could do it meant nobody needed to budget for it. I put the gloves back in the closet. Saturday morning, Megan met the contractor at the cabin. She called me once from the utility room. We found the main shutoff, but there are 2 smaller valves behind the pressure tank. Do you remember which one feeds the outside line? I told her which pipe to follow and said the contractor should verify it before closing anything. A little later she called again because the generator's service sticker was partly worn off. I gave her the model information from my notes. Then she started asking, after they drain the main line, do we open the upstairs faucets first or the downstairs ones? And do you usually disconnect the, Megan? She stopped. I'll answer something specific if you're stuck. I'm not running the shutdown from here. There was a pause. Right, sorry, that was it. The contractor did not need me to run the job. By that afternoon, Megan sent the owners a short service summary. The water system had been drained and protected for winter. The generator battery was testing near the end of its useful life, so they replaced it. The roof hatch latch had loosened enough that the hatch was not pulling down evenly, so they repaired that too. I would probably have noticed both. The battery had been slower on the last test start, and I had tightened that latch once in the spring. Those were exactly the kinds of small things somebody had to look for while they were there. The owners split the winterization bill, the battery, and the latch repair. Derek was still irritated about the price. His complaint changed from, "We should not pay for this," to, "We need to book earlier next year because short notice is stupid expensive." I did not argue with that. He was right. The cold arrived the following week. Megan checked the cabin's temperature monitor from home, and the service company's report stayed in the shared folder with the rest of the property records. The water was off, the generator had a new battery, and the roof hatch stayed secured through the first stretch of freezing weather. For a while, things between Derek and me were awkward. He never gave me some big apology. I did not ask for one. At Thanksgiving, he made a joke about me retiring from cabin duty, and I told him, probably sharper than I needed to, I retired from being the whole plan. He looked annoyed. My aunt changed the subject to pie. Later, I thought of 3 calmer things I could have said. That is usually how those conversations work for me. Megan handled it differently. She started a shared folder with the generator manual, propane contact, well information, service receipts, and a simple maintenance calendar. She asked me to look at the equipment list once. I did. I corrected the generator model number and told her which outdoor spigot had the older shutoff. I did not build the system for them. By spring, the owners had also arranged the dock work earlier than usual. Once they were actually tracking maintenance by season, it made sense to schedule vendors before everyone got busy. I still went to the cabin the next summer. Megan invited a few of us for a weekend in July. We grilled outside, took the old aluminum boat across the lake, and spent most of Sunday trying to keep the kids from bringing wet towels into every room. At one point, Derek asked if I knew why the generator had started a little rough that morning. I said, no idea. Check the service sheet. He did. When the owners met about the next annual budget, I did not go. There was no reason for me to. Megan sent me a photo of the finished maintenance page afterward because she thought I would appreciate it. Taxes, insurance, dock, propane. Spring opening. Then one line near the bottom. Fall winterization, local cabin service, schedule by October 1st. Under it was a reminder to confirm the generator inspection and roof hatch before the appointment. I texted back, looks good.